He is also the program manager for the FAO priority work area in the region on trade and market opportunities for inclusive growth. And one thing that you may want to know is that before he moved to the Sub-Region Office for Africa, he was the FAO representative to Nigeria and ECOWAS. Sofian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin. Do we sit or stand?
No, you start. Straight.
Thank you, Justin, for the introduction. Colleagues, excellencies, as I learned in Nigeria, all protocols observed. Justin has already introduced me, so I probably don't need to get into that. But I was also, what I'm going to present is actually the work we are doing in support of the AFCFTA, so that at least we can use that as a stage to see how we could develop partnerships, not only with ReNAPRI, but with others who are here, who are also working in this area. The FAO works, goes beyond the AFCFTA, and we have been supporting African countries in all areas of agriculture. And now I see that when people talk about agriculture, you have to mention fisheries, forestry. As a matter of fact, the overarching policy agenda in Africa, the CADEP, was actually crafted in FAO. So, and we are pleased that that has become the cornerstone of FAO's work. Now, with the African Continental Free Trade, I'm not going to use a presentation. It's okay? Okay. We are doing a lot of work that are complementary to what they are doing. And we are also pleased that our regional office for Africa is in Ghana, where the secretariat of the AFCFTA is. So I will just briefly go around what we are doing. Just a short summary, just on that aspect, because we have so many complementary supports, but just specifically on the AFCFTA. So first thing we did in 2021 was to actually support the African Union to reformulate the framework for boosting intra-Africa trade. So we did this with them. It was presented by their governing bodies, accepted, and this framework responds to opportunities in regional trade, enhance resilience to shocks, such as the COVID, through improved policy coherence, investment, regional value chain development, which I saw was a big object of this meeting. And two of our key areas are trade facilitation and food safety. So we are doing work with them in this area. So currently we are also implementing with the African Continental Free Trade Area Secretariat a technical cooperations project that basically looks at the value chains that they have identified for the region. Within that also, we are working with the AFCFTA and the AUC and FARA to develop this Common Africa Agro-Packs program, which would try to develop special processing zones for special agricultural products. Now, in Ghana, which is the secretariat of the AFCFTA, you would notice that a lot of understanding of the protocols and what the AFCFTA is doing is not well understood in the agricultural sector and stakeholders. So we are doing work with them as it is the host to start by developing awareness so that people know where information is, where they could get advice, especially for agriculture, for the sector. So we are doing this work with them. Also in Rwanda, because within the AFCFTA, there is a guided trade initiative for countries that have actually done much more in terms of operationalizing the protocols. So we are trying, so there are eight countries that are in this program so that they could start and test how this agreement is going through. So in Rwanda, we are doing 2 activities with them. The first one is to do an assessment of their cross-border trade strategy. And the other one is to look at their national investment plans within the framework of the CADEP so that they could develop their own national strategy. Now, we are also doing work in partnership with the International Trade Center to mainstream gender and youth into the AFCFTA so that they could benefit from that. Now, the major work we are doing within supporting trade is on food safety, harmonization of food regulation and food control systems. So here we started working with the COMESA trade facilitation program long before the AFCFTA came into light. And we are doing work in Mali and Senegal to support their national food standards. Also, we do support the small and medium sized enterprises in terms of understanding what is required in trade regulation. So we have done that in East and Southern Africa, with the Northern Corridor Authority. We've held training programs also for East and Southern Africa in a bunch of other areas in trade facilitation, food safety issues, and we do work with other agencies that have similar mandates with us, the Standard for Trade Facility, the WTO, the World Bank, and others. So we do this work. Now, we are also trying, one of the greatest weaknesses in African food systems is in understanding these standards. And most of you would know that the codex where the standards are being developed is housed in FAO in Rome. So we have a codex trust fund that we try to encourage countries to participate, especially developing countries and especially African countries, so that they could understand these food standards and food regulation even within the continent itself. Now, let me see what else I can say here. So we worked with the African Union Commission in also developing their SPS standards, which is basically part of Codex and part of the WTO. And that now is being rolled out. I mean, there are lots of challenges in this type of work because, I mean, the borders, especially for cross-border trade, where you have, I mean, there is a plan to do this one-stop border post, but they have not materialized very well. So we have a lot of challenges there. Now, the other area that we see of strategic importance is the link between trade policy and nutrition. This has not been well developed, so we are doing work to see how we could develop these synergies. Also, within that framework, we are trying now to understand specific countries' nutritional need and how they are going to be able to trade. So another area that we could develop synergy is in some of the research that is done here. I mean, first of all, FAO maintains the largest database in the world on agriculture and food systems. And it also has components. We have country-level data. We have early warning systems that could be useful for researchers and it is open source. You don't have to pay any fee to use it. Yes. Now, I would want to wrap up my talk by just telling you that we are also within this framework talking about cross-cutting issues. How do you integrate gender and youth concerns into the AFCFTA protocol? We are working on that. We are working on the environment. We are working on data and information, especially digitalization. And then we have a big program on South-South cooperation so that countries can learn and develop partnerships among themselves. And that program is not only between African countries, but it's also with other South countries. So with that, let me end here, Justin. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Sofian, for that informative presentation. And I'm sure participants in the room have picked up a lot of points. Maybe the only one that I would want to emphasize was, and this is because in this room we have people involved in policies and research. I'm sure you heard that the link between trade policy and nutrition is not well established. I think that is one area that you may want to look at. We are going to go to now the first key presentation, and I'm going to introduce the two colleagues that are coming here, and I would want them to come up here once I introduce them. And this is going to be on the 2023 OECD FAO Agricultural Outlook and a 2022 Special Scenario Analysis on Achieving Zero Hunger Sustainably. And the presentation will be done by Abdi Ali. As he comes up here, I will read his brief bio. Thank you. Ali is an economist in the Market and the Trade Division of FAO, based in headquarters in Rome. He has almost a decade of public and private sector experience analyzing economic, environmental, and agricultural policy issues and trends. He holds a master's degree in economics, and he is a gentleman who employs economic research, modeling, and data analysis to support strategic policy making and program development. The discussant for this presentation is Dr. Tracy Davids. With more than a decade of experience in agricultural market analysis, Trace is an executive director and leads the commodity markets and foresight program at the Bureau of Food and Agricultural Policy, BFAP. Our research focus includes commodity market modeling, competitiveness, price information, and international trade. She coordinates BFAP's annual Agricultural Outlook publication, which I think even fits well for her to be a discussant, considering that we'll be looking at the 2023 Agricultural Outlook. So she coordinates the publication for South Africa and the broader region. She has an extensive record of international collaboration, contributing regularly to international market outlook, publications, and conferences. So ladies and gentlemen, I call upon Ali to deliver his presentation.
Is my presentation up? Thank you for the introduction. I want to talk a little bit about the OECD FAO Agricultural Outlook. Some of you may have seen this presentation before, so I'm going to go through it quickly, just highlighting the key points. But before I start, just have one comment to make that, it's really good that we have a lot of expertise in here. But I don't see the students, the graduate students. Next time, please bring on graduate students. They should be part of solving these problems. They have ideas. And it would be great for a knowledge transfer. So I would go over briefly on the outlook at the global level, but with focus on sub-Saharan Africa. But I will also sort of talk about a couple scenarios, one on fertilizer prices and another on achieving zero hunger sustainably. So what is the OECD FAO outlook? It's just a consensus outlook. It's not all model-based, right? And one of the things that I see, and I encourage you, is that I don't see a lot of participation from the region. And I would want to see going forward that the stories on these reports and on other reports too, the voices of the region is told from the region's perspective, right? It's you who can tell your own story, right? So I would encourage participation not only in these reports but all in other exercise, instead of having these stories told from Rome or from somewhere else. So general specific assumptions, it takes into account macroeconomic, demographic, and policy considerations. Of course, it's really difficult to do outlooks with the current global situation, conflicts, the pandemic, the resulting fiscal and monetary policies. So it's really difficult to do that. So that's why we employ, consensus or even ideas from analysts, people who know the markets well. One thing that we do is we take current policies as they are. So this allows us to do scenario analysis. I mean, these projections are not forecasts. They're just, they're just outlooks so that we can actually say, what if we change such policy, or what if something happens, what is the impact? So going into it, global agricultural commodities. This chart shows on the left axis, it's the agricultural consumption by income group, and on the right axis, it's just the population. The black black graphics there represent population. And a couple of things from here. It's really okay. So overall, projections of the last OECD FAO outlook shows 13% increase in global consumption. But there are interesting differences here. Like in the high income group, populations are not growing. They are affluent, so consumption is saturated, right? So there's no additional consumption coming from those regions. In the low and middle income economies, populations are growing. They're increasingly becoming affluent. So a lot of the consumption we're projecting comes from those regions. In the low income, which a lot of sub-Saharan Africans unfortunately include, there's a bit of a growth, a little bit, 5%, but it's really small, and sort of like consumption. The increase in consumption, per capita consumption, is eroded by. The increase in overall consumption is eroded by increase in population, right? And so affordability of diets would be a problem going forward. This graph shows production of agricultural commodities and overall growth on the right axis. Again, similar story, but 60% of additional production we are projecting is coming from Asia, India, China, Asia Pacific, and it's because of the adopting technologies, increased farm management practices, availability of of inputs and use of agricultural inputs, more use of agricultural inputs. But in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a bit of a growth we're projecting, but it's small from a small base. Agricultural production is expected to grow by in the region by 24% going forward. But at the same time, because of population is growing, per capita production is declining and has been declining since 2015. So that's a problem there. Going to the next slide, this is productivity ranges across different parts of the world, right? So first of all, production is going to come from higher productivity, higher yields, higher carcass weights, higher milk yields. But there is a huge yield gap, right? The top, it's mostly North America. Technologies are different. Natural resources endowments are different. Policies are different. As you understand that Africa doesn't, import GM seeds. Farm management practices are different. So all these contribute to ranges of this. And as you can see, the red dots there, which is either at the bottom or close to the bottom, is the productivity in Africa. So a lot needs to be done going forward, right? A lot needs to be done. And as you can see, technology is different across different products. So for beef, it's and sort of like, you know, milk production and maize, it's so wide. So this is on trade, and this is an interesting graph, right? So first of all, like America's region has been and is going to be the dominant supplier of agricultural commodities, right? Net supplier or net exporter. And land-constrained or resource-constrained regions would be on the receiving end. So Asia, mostly Asia, Near East and North Africa, even Sub-Saharan Africa, right? But Sub-Saharan Africa is not resource constrained. Like, I mean, we are responsible for 20% of, almost 20% of the global agricultural land. This, does it work?
It works.
Does it work?
Yes, it should work.
I don't see it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I can actually work with this. So North America is going to be the net supplier, and and this is going to be increasing. But the region, the Sub-Saharan Africa, net imports are going to expand by 77% according to the projections. But we're not resource constrained. I mean, with 20% of the global agricultural land, but yet only 7% of animal and crop production. So a lot needs to be done. You know, there has to be some sort of a transformation to sort of make sure that we increase production sustainably. The share of internationally traded production would be around 20%, between 20 to 23%. Finally, this is just, you know, some reference prices, global prices. You know, expect, you know, there's been correction since 2022, and that's gonna end sometime this year, and sort of like higher productivity will make sure that you know, the marginal cost of production goes down, and so the prices would sort of go down. But there are uncertainties, right? So and domestic prices essentially, sort of consumer prices will be different because they would be impacted by processing costs, and it will depend on where how efficient additional processing is. Okay, so the first scenario is, and we've talked about fertilizer this session. So I just want to just put something out there on this. We did sort of a 25% increase in fertilizer prices and how it impacts, you know, agricultural commodity prices. And you can see, you know, the orange average, global average is for every 25% increase, for every 1% increase in fertilizer prices, there will be a 0.2% change on commodity prices. So that's about 20% pass-through. For Sub-Saharan Africa, this is about 30% pass-through because, you know, fertilizer use is not optimal in the region. And these higher prices translate to higher food prices. Higher commodity prices translate to higher food prices, and the projection is undernourishment in the region could increase by 3.5 million in 2032. So this is sort of like an interesting way to see that like right now there's this sort of prices are bit coming down, but just in case, you know, sort of like, you know, how input prices are significant for food security. But how about achieving zero hunger sustainably, right? So, you know, sort of like, you know, at the end of the day, you know, FAO's key overarching objective is to end hunger and achieve food security for all, and doing that sustainably, right? So, we sort of like, you know, we know that, you know, the recent SOFI report, there are like 716 million people that are hungry. that were hungry, and sort of a third of that was from sub-Saharan Africa. That's on the left side. In 2030, there will be 600 million, and they're projecting a half of that would be from sub-Saharan Africa. On the right side, there is agricultural GHG emissions. They're expected to increase 7.5% over the next 10 years. That's direct GHG emissions, but in the sub-Saharan Africa, it's going to go, according to the projections, by 19%, because we have livestock, especially, is increasing. The herd size is increasing because we're not producing. Productivity is not going up, so the only way to increase production is more herds on the field. Okay, so we need to achieve these two goals simultaneously, right? We need to end hunger, but at the same time we need to decrease emissions. So how do we do that? So we did a scenario, right? And this scenario essentially says, what is the level of productivity that we need to eliminate hunger and to ensure that we put the sector on track to the 2015 Paris Agreement? So zero hunger, in FAO is a prevalence of undernourishment. That is, the number of people or the proportion of people that are consuming dietary energy that's not sufficient to maintain active and healthy life. Reduction in direct GHG emissions, we're going with 6%. There was an OECD report that said to put the sector on track to 2050, towards a 2%, maintaining a global temperature at 2%, 12% is needed. So we did 6% until 2030. So it's not a target, it's just an arbitrary, not an arbitrary number, but it's less than what would be required. Okay, so to achieve zero hunger, significant increase in food consumption is required, right? For sub-Saharan Africa, 26% increase in per capita calorie availability to 2030, right? And so that is about 600 kilocalories per person per day. Right now, it's about 2,450, so it goes on to 3,000 kilocalories per day per person. And so it's a huge increase, right? It's a huge increase. And so what we did here is we looked at all countries where there was a level of hunger, and then we make sure that we raise food consumption such that 97.5% of the population is consuming the minimum dietary energy requirement to sustain an active, healthy life. Similarly, food production should increase to support this. The scenario suggests that global food production needs to increase by 22%. That's double the rate that we expected. And we're assuming that most production growth is actually coming from the countries that are facing hunger rather than being imported, right? In sub-Saharan Africa, we have to increase production by 43% from where we are now to achieve zero hunger. So what do we need right now? So the question is, we need to reduce emissions and we need to increase food consumption. So the question then is, we have to increase productivity, and the scenario shows that crop yields have to increase by 24% by 2030, and livestock has to increase by 31%. So to give you a perspective, in the last 10 years, crop yields have increased by 13%. So that is almost double what we experienced last 10 years. For animal productivity, it has been almost zero for the last 10 years globally. And so 31% increase in global productivity is a huge, huge increase, which I don't think is achievable with the current policies in place. So what about sub-Saharan Africa? Of course, we have to reduce land use. So cereal land use has to come down to reduce emissions. Oil seeds, same. And meat, herd has to come down. That's on the left panel there. Milk, we've projected a huge increase in milk herds before, so they have to come down from 22% to 6% there. So if we are producing herd size and if we're reducing land use, then yields have to go up, right? And as you can see on the right panel, crop yields have to go up, but look at livestock yields. They have to increase by over 100% to make sure that we have a 6% reduction in GHG emissions and we achieve zero hunger in 2030. So in summary, I hope I didn't take a lot of time. So these are the key points here, right? So basically, with the current policies in place, we will not hit the target of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030, right? So productivity is key. So we have to massively increase production to achieve that sustainably. But that's not alone. Productivity alone will not achieve that. So there have to be other factors, right? We have to consider, reducing poverty, mitigating GHG emissions directly so that we can actually increase production. There's also food loss and waste. Around 30% of global food is lost from farm to consumers. Let me give you a bit of a context. The data is a bit shaky on global food loss, but 30%, let's say in Africa there's a 30% food loss, right? And the amount of food that we need to increase to achieve zero hunger is 26%, right? So if we can actually reduce food loss by half, the amount of the increase in productivity will be much less than what we're projecting here. So with that, I will end. Justin, thank you.
He was very much worried about time. What he didn't know that if he had gone beyond his allocated time, I would have put him somehow. Okay, I think let me call upon Tracy to come and also respond to that and give her views.
Thank you. Thanks very much for a great presentation and also for a great publication every year. I think there's few publications that at a global level provide on an annual or frequent basis the level of context that the FAO OECD Outlook publication does. I think you did a great job in sticking to time to summarize that publication in 15 minutes. I think in line with your presentation, I'd probably put my comments into sections. I think firstly, just to focus on the global outlook, as I said, it does a great job of giving us what the current situation is, what are the supply-demand dynamics, where are the surpluses, where are the deficits, where is trade likely to occur, where are the vulnerabilities. It also allocates quite a bit of space to explain how we got to the current situation and what that implies going forward. So it doesn't, as he rightly said, give us a clear forecast. We don't necessarily try to say what the price is going to be 10 years from now. But I think it gives us a general path. It gives us a directional view on where we're going if we don't change things. And I think in that sense, it often represents a challenge. I think your presentation, if I look at the scenarios, is maybe somewhat depressing, I think, if one considers that. The first time when I first got involved in this, the first time I spent some time in Rome contributing to the very outlook, I still remember someone saying that if we do reach the point that we're projecting 10 years from now, then we haven't really done our job in terms of communicating the results, because we really need to put the challenge out there to say, how do we change this? How do we change this path? How do we reach a different spot to what the business as usual will get us? And I think from that perspective is where the scenario work really becomes useful. So the scenarios that he showed is two different ones. I think the one on fertilizer is great. We've spent a lot of time in the network and also in this conference and previous conferences talking about fertilizer. We had a session yesterday afternoon that looked at the impact of the war in the Black Sea region, which is often, fertilizer was one of the biggest things influenced. I think this takes in a sense, one step further in terms of quantifying both direct and indirect impact. So, in a region like Africa where we're a net importer of many products, you have a first round of impact in terms of your fertilizer cost and your production, and then you have a second round impact in the sense that global prices are higher because the world also is sitting with this fertilizer problem. So I think it did a great job of doing that, and what's nice about it also is because the modeling system enforces certain connections and linkages between markets, you get a much broader impact. So if you have an impact on crop production prices, there are implications for livestock, for meat consumption, etc. So it does a great job of pulling these impacts through the entire food system. The other one, the zero hunger, I think that highlights very, very nicely the tension that we face in terms of these goals that we've set for ourselves. So on the one hand, there's reducing hunger. We know that we'll need a whole lot of additional food to be consumed, but on the other side, there's these climate goals. And I think yesterday we had, again, an entire session on climate and the challenges that we face on that front. So how do we bring those two together? How do we overcome those tensions? I think that's a very critical question to ask. And I think this, in a sense, is probably a first step towards that. I think it does a great job of telling us what would be required. I think it also throws down the gauntlet to us as researchers, in a sense, to say, how do we get there? I mean, it says what's required, and your conclusions rightly note at the end that, you know, it's much more than what we've achieved in the past, and does it really seem realistic? I think our challenge is to say, how can we break it down in steps? What are individual actions that we can take? Can we quantify them? How far do they get us? To what extent can they get the ball rolling so that we get into a positive sort of spin to at least start moving in the right direction? And if we can get one thing right, then we start with the next and the next and the next, and ultimately we can then get there. So I think, yeah, maybe I'll leave you at that to say thank you for highlighting that. Thank you for challenging us, for showing us what's necessary, and let's as a group see how we can get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali and Trace. And indeed, without transforming agri-food systems, hunger and emission targets will be missed. That's one point I got there. And then, of course, strong yields increase are required in Africa if we are to achieve sustainable zero hunger by 2030. Okay, now we get into Q&A. So we have Sofian, who gave an highlight on the FAO support for the African Continental Free Trade Area, and then the presentation and the respondent on the outlook. So the floor is open for questions and answers. Okay, I've seen one hand there. Okay, let's start there. If we can have the microphone on that side. Okay, there he is, standing. There you are.
Okay, thank you for your patience. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for two, I think, very well done presentations. I would also like to thank the FAO for its strong presence at the ReNAPRI conference, and would like to, very encouraged, gratified actually, to hear the moderator say that he sees great potential for collaboration with this network. So that's all good. Okay, now to my question. The second presentation by Dr. Abdi, very interesting. You've made a strong case for why agricultural productivity really needs to grow rapidly in sub-Saharan Africa. And I'm a little bit frustrated with how do you unpack that in terms of what actually needs to happen on the ground in Africa to accelerate agricultural productivity growth? Hopefully, the people in this room who have all done research on such things have been able to already identify the kind of public interventions and actions that are necessary. And I wish that FAO and other organizations would be a little bit more explicit about what is required to achieve agricultural productivity growth in sub-Saharan Africa, and would love to hear your views about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, let's get the second question.
Thank you very much. I think I've also enjoyed the presentations. My question goes to, I think I've forgotten the name, Sofian.
We have Adi,
No,
Tracy, and Sofian.
Yes, Sofian, the first presenter. I want your honest opinion. Do you think African Continental Free Trade Arrangement, I know the headquarters is in Accra, would facilitate trade within Africa? And secondly, we know, and there's also the fear that small businesses, startups may collapse as a result of this free trade, because the big boys will come and bully the small ones and get them out of business. What are the support mechanisms that you are putting in place to ensure that the poor businessman, the startups, are able to weather the storm under such circumstances? Thank you.
Okay, I think let me have a third question and then we get the answers.
Just to complement this, to give an example, in this meeting, we've been talking about Kenya importing, maize from elsewhere, while Uganda has, a lot of maize. We had Nigeria producing a lot of, fertilizer, which is exported, yet within Africa, there is no fertilizer in other countries that are struggling. How does this, free trade arrangement facilitate the movement of goods and food and services within the region? Does it really promote or it makes it worse? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's have the responses. I've taken note of you. Yes. So let's start with Ali, and I think the last questions are for Sufyan. So Ali.
Okay, so.
Yeah, what needs to be done?
Okay, so I'll tell this story of one of my cousins, an older one, and he has about 300 cattle, free grazing somewhere in East Africa.
Sorry, we might just need you to lean a
Use
little
the
bit into your mic.
Use the mic. I can use this one. Doesn't work. Yeah, that's good. So this is like sort of an experience that, okay, so I have this cousin, he's an older guy, he has, not yet, okay. He has about 300 cattle roaming somewhere in East Africa, right? And sort of like, he consumes milk and he buys cereals or sort of exchanges milk with cereals, and that's what he consumes. He doesn't eat meat. The only time he eats meat is if one of his cattle is killed or injured by a hyena or a lion, right? So basically, every time a drought happens, 75% of them die, and he has to start over, right? So it is, and he talks to me about this, and it's sort of like, I try to keep telling him about that the world is different now from what it used to be, because he's used to this long time ago. So basically, what a person like that needs is training, extension services, right? People to sort of, we cannot solve the problem of increasing production unless we can talk to these smallholder farmers that sort of educate them on the dangers of climate change and make sort of farming an agribusiness essentially, right? We look this from a social perspective, but it should be an economic perspective essentially. So what needs to be done? Policies have to change at some point to sort of think about ways in which we can increase productivity, right? there has to be a lot of investment in technology training, technology transfer, extension services, right? So farm management practices have to be part of it. So it's a lot of things that can be done. And sure, like, I would expect that to come from within countries, from within regions, from within districts, rather than from top down.
Okay, thank you, Harry. And I'm sure amongst you, there are some that would want to contribute on what needs to be done. And I'm sure even Prof there also has the answers to that question. So we'll see if we have time, we'll come to that. Let's have Sophia, let's have Tracy contribute to that.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe just to add one point to his point on productivity. I think it's absolutely, a lot of work has been done and a lot of us knows what needs to happen. But unfortunately, the reality on the continent is also sometimes when it does happen, your local markets get flooded very quickly, prices fall quite far, and producers step back again. So I think there's also something to be said that when this happens, which absolutely must happen, and I think they know what they need to do, we need to make sure that the markets are there, the products can move efficiently to regions that don't have a surplus of production, so that these producers, when they go to the additional cost to be more productive, can remain profitable. I think that's a critical area that we often miss. And I think the distribution systems, and it ties in a sense to the Continental Free Trade Agreement, the cost to move things on the continent between markets plays a big role in that. And if we can get the infrastructural investments to improve that, to make that more efficient and to make that cheaper, we will also go a long way towards aiding sustainable productivity growth.
Thank you very much. I think I want to thank the two response because you've answered part of the question already. But yes, there is a lot of optimism which we want to build up. There is a political momentum for this agreement to happen. This agreement was firstly formalized in the Abuja Treaty in 1991. And up till this time, we are still at the first level of negotiations. So you need to get a dynamic political momentum to move it. And definitely, we know that the smallholders would be the first losers in this. They will be crowded out. But they need to have support. What you have to do, or what governments need to do, is to look at alternative employment and try to see if that is viable to support smallholders. So, but definitely, the momentum that we see in the continent is encouraging. So we would like to build on that, But it is a tough sell. I mean, agriculture is not treated as a business, as Abdi said, and we are talking about trade. Then you talk about the border problems, the trade facilitation mechanism, the movement of basic goods. Then there is a whole host of agricultural commodities that people don't even look at. Primarily, people look at food crops. They don't look at the industrial aspect of crops. So there is a lot to be done, but we are optimistic that we will get there at some point. Thank you very much.
Okay, also addressed the question that he had.
They are more or less linked together. The question of Kenya, I mean, importing GM maize, it baffled all of us. We don't know why they are importing GM maize. It's going to affect their livestock products. Is going to, because you cannot sell it now if you use that GM maize as feed. So it is going to affect them significantly. So, I mean, the question of Nigeria is also very, very important. Nigeria is exporting, it's not a significant amount. It is, when you look at the export, it is basically around $300,000-$400,000. And these are, a lot of it is bilateral arrangements that they have made. But of course, I mean, getting the inputs to produce fertilizer is very critical in most of African countries. How do you move the potash from Togo to even Benin, which is next door? It's a nightmare. The business environment is very difficult. I was in Nigeria when Dangote went and opened a factory in one of the neighboring countries. And when he wanted to go there, they were asking him for a visa, even though there is free movement of people. You know? So we need to address those challenges. And we have to do that at the customs in this region, especially in the Great Lakes. The custom officers, you have to even train them, bring them in to understand that this is a regulation. If you come with a good, from Rwanda where they use the metric system, and you take something in the imperial system to the neighbor, it creates a whole host of problems. This is one of the most basic things that we are not able to address. So we have a lot of challenges, but we have that level of optimism. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's use 1 minute for the next round of questions. We already have one colleague here who is going to ask, and then we'll have a response. I think so far, okay. Okay, now we have 3. Now each one of you only have 30 seconds to pose your questions.
I'll be very fast because it's been preempted by Tracy and Sophia. What I wanted to ask to Ali, that is assuming that prices, commodity prices after 2023 will go down and stabilize. And I was worrying that have we considered some factors like the current conflicts, the transport challenges in this part of the world? What really are the assumptions and factors leading to that? Maybe we need to understand further on that one.
Thank you. The second, okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting findings and observations. But are we considering the political economy of our recommendations? Probably that's where we are missing the point. What are we doing in terms of the political economy? Because it's all politics. Great findings. I think you heard from the PS the other day. They don't read. I mean, it's not, those are not my words, but he says, I don't read. So what are we doing about it? Thank you.
Okay, the last one. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. My first question goes to Sophia. There is these private standards that come from a simple, company and later on engulfs the globe. We have seen HESIP, we have seen Eurogap, now it's a global gap. How does FAO probably play, a role in such standards? Then the other one is on the scenario analysis. COVID has taught us something. And now we are seeing other things like war and so forth. I think we shouldn't actually shy away from simulating some worst case scenarios. We sometimes talk about it, and there is a lot of talk about it, that probably one day there will be some dangerous, even more, impactful viruses to come. And then I don't know about the variables that probably are used in this simulation, where the Americas, the whole region, seem to be doing much better. And when I look at Latin America, there's still some very sad pictures there. Haiti, I saw how Haiti was actually suffering, not far away from Sub-Saharan Africa. And actually certain countries there, I don't know, I think it needs also unpacking some of those variables. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My speakers, panelists, your quick responses. We don't have time remaining for this session.
I can start it. Commodity prices. Well, if I could forecast commodity prices well, I would be rich. I would be like somewhere in a beach, enjoying the sun. So but in all fairness, if you look at 20 years ago, if thought like, maize yields would be, 10, whatever, or 12 tons per hectare in the US, it would be like, what are you saying, right? So productivity in general has been increasing over time. And that has been actually leading to reduction in the marginal production cost and hence prices. So that is the assumption that, of the stable prices. We don't model volatility. We can't do that, as I said. But it takes into account, the current situation. It takes into account the pandemic, its impacts, and also the case with the wars, especially in Ukraine, right? But it's kind of really difficult. So we depend a lot on expats, right? So what do you think it would be instead of depending on models completely? So that's that. Simulating some worst case scenarios. I mean, every year when we do the outlook, we focus on specific scenarios. Like I think a couple of years or a year ago we did one on Ukraine. So it's actually regularly done, right? If there's an event coming up, there are worst case scenarios that are done. Especially at the OECD, they also produce a lot of scenarios. I would, in the interest of time, I would stop there and give it to Tracy.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so maybe just a very quick point. I guess touching on the same one. So these projections are generated by an equilibrium model. So when I was still studying, I still remember I was told that the best cure for high prices is high prices. So people respond. We've been through a cycle of very high prices, and producers respond as a result. So they do expand production, and that is in a sense what drives prices down. And we're seeing it already. I think a lot of, if you look internationally, if you look at the FAO Food Price Index, dollar-based prices globally, many of them are back to pre-war levels, despite the war still ongoing. So whereas the model does account for what's going on in Ukraine, for instance, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's quite a slow recovery in Ukraine in terms of production. But other countries respond, and we have seen area expand, and despite not great weather conditions in some big producing countries, we have seen prices come down. So what the outlook does assume is that those yields will normalize again over time. Then we do sit with more production in the system. That's not to say that prices in some regions, particularly here where transport costs are high, where things are imported, where exchange rates in many countries have depreciated sharply, are not still high. But I think at a global level in US dollar prices, that's what we see. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think let me respond to the last point you made about not simulating wars and other things. We have a major constraint. We are an intergovernmental organization. We are owned by the governments. So no government would want you to make an assumption of war and go present it to the rest of the world. So we face that constraint, but you are right. Maybe when we do it, we keep it to ourselves. So, but that is a big problem. The other point, I mean, you raised another point about private standards. I was in the division where we collect private standards. The private standards, we are not advocating for it. We have the codex standards. And if that is the minimum standard that you need to trade. And if countries cannot adhere to that or implement it, it becomes problems when you go to these large supermarket chains and they have their own standards, they have their branding standards. So that is a big problem, especially for small countries. So we had seen a lot of countries in Africa want to implement a standard in Japan, the standard in Canada, the standard in the EU. They're all different. Whereas they have not adopted the Codex, which is the basic minimum international standard that countries should adopt. We collected those standards so much that we cannot keep track of them, because because these are private arrangements. So we have no mandate, we as an intergovernmental body. Lately, though, we have been bringing the private sector in. They themselves have come in voluntarily to understand how the standards are set. So there is also scope for something to be done. But definitely, it is a difficult task to collect standards. And I want to say I agree with the person who talked about governance. It's all what we've said here is about governance. Governance is the key issue. The political economy is what drives what is done here. Sometimes I even wonder if the government's institutions are not crowding out private sector, because you see they have more money than the rest of the economy. So it is crowding out private sector participation. So yes, but governance is very important. It is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sofian. I think let's give a hand to our panelists and speakers. I think Sofian will be receiving more clappings since he's going to remain there. Okay, thanks Tracy, thanks Adi. We are going to move to the next presentation, which is on the food import bills and agriculture export revenue focus on Africa food import. And this will be presented by Danishwa Punith, who is an economist in the market and trade division of FAO at headquarters. This is working with Ali. And Danishwa holds a Master of Science in Statistics, and another Master of Arts in Finance, and a Master of Economics. I'm not going to stop. Because you see, sometimes as a moderator, you ask people and say, give me your brief. So if you give it to me, I'll announce it. And he also has a PhD in agricultural economics. And before joining FAO, he was a professor teaching at the University of Pretoria. Sure. So we have Danishwa as the main presenter, and then we have Salomon Mbai, who is going to be the discussant, respondent to the presentation. Salomon is an agricultural economist, and since June 2022, he's been working as director of the Agricultural Trade Policy Institute at the Namibia University of Science and Technology, where he is also teaching in the Department of Agricultural Sciences and Agribusiness. He is a board member of ReNAPRI, I think since March 2022, and is also on the Namibian Agronomic Board. He was appointed by the Minister for Agriculture in Namibia, I think from June 2023. And he has consulted for the Namibian Meat Board, the Agricultural Bank of Namibia, the Environmental Investment Fund, FAO, the Namibia National Farmers Union, the Red Cross Namibia, the Namibia Emerging Farmers Union, and the Namibia Agricultural Union. And interestingly, he has over 20 years experience as a part-time cattle farmer. Let's welcome the colleagues. So, Punith, the floor is yours for food import bills and agriculture export bureau revenue focus on Africa food import. Yeah, so we can use this one.
Yeah, no, I'll just keep my laptop on because a couple of things I need to talk about the laptop. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Actually, I'm from Mauritius, so I'm trying to be a little marketing Mauritius to the audience. It's a beautiful island. Sometimes they don't consider us as Africans, but we are part of Africa. Anyway, why we choose this topic today? We see numbers are thrown out left and right that so many billions are being imported. We know Africa is a net importer. Since 1982, we flipped from exporter, we became an importer. But there's a lot of numbers are thrown out there. Some say the Africa import bill is between 35 to 40 billions ranges. Some say it's about 56. Some say it's about 72. We as policymakers here, when you're sitting in a meeting, the minister asks you, what's my import bill? Oh, according to this, it's about this. The other one says, no. according to that one, is this amount. As a minister, we say, but guys, I want a number which is justifiable so that I can go to the cabinet or go to the Ministry of, for the budgetary purposes we need to know. So these are the questions that always come to our mind. And we in FAO, first the work was started by Sufyan, who is sitting in the corner in the 90s, when he started pulling numbers, putting together. Then issues started raising. So why you are including this in the food, in agricultural imports? Why you are including this? Because let's make sure that not all agricultural products are consumed as food. So the numbers here the confusion start creating. So that's how we started trying to think at how to explain. We should be able to be aware that what we are telling is food import bills, and what we are telling is agri-food import bills. These are the 2 points that I'm going to raise it here. I'm not going to be an academician today or teaching how to do it, but they're just going to flag the points so that next time when we're going to compute the bills, we are aware what we're going to talk. We know food import bill is very important. Food import bills are very important because we need to monitor how much food we're going to be importing the countries, the prices and the cost of the imports. Policymakers need it, especially in the net food importing countries, which most of us are. Then government always try to do planning. And we saw it recently during COVID period. Government was trying to jump here, jump there. Things were being traded. Singapore was the one having boats loaded with ship. Ship was loaded and sitting in the oceans. They got the call, they would send the boat out, trade was done. Most of the things started happening a lot there. Okay. Then we need to also monitor the capacity of countries to import the bills. When we created that index, the food import capacity was in 2002. We had a colleague, Deep Ford and myself. We came up with a formula to how to be able to know what is our food import capacity. All right? So these are the 2 things we needed to know. But here's the question to you guys. So why the bill differs? Everybody's telling us differently. Here, there are a couple of reasons behind it. First, depending on the data source we are going to use. And out there are many different data sources. Then the methods that we're going to use to compute it. Let's remember it. Imports are reported in cost, insurance, and freight. Whereas export is reported in fee on board, FOB. So there's a big, wide difference here. And government, when we import it, when we do the valuation tax at the border, we do it on CIF value, not on FOB, because FOB is leaving. So the other end. So it's quite critical. Then, when we try to compare it, the comparison cannot be done, because country X is using a different source data, and we are using different, so we don't have a comparability. Later on, you will see the definition also, how it changes. So the method that we use in the formulas, assumptions, which we economists, we always do a lot. We assume, and then we try to come down and prove something to estimate it. Like mathematics and statistics, we don't assume it much. Only when you're trying to be theoretical. So now, here, one of the versions that we were going to talk about today. We know all the international databases are classified and grouped commodities differently. For us, the famous one that is there, agreed by the United Nations, and is maintained by them, and is discussed with countries to come and agree on a standard procedures. This one is the Standard International Trade Classifications. This has a very long story, so I don't want to go dwell on that. It has started since 1952 and came 1966. Certain definitions was modified. Now, currently, we are on the SITC revision 4. Here, that's how they classify the food. I mean to say food. Let's be clear. It's food, nothing other than food. So you will see all these groupings are on the food basis. All right? We know when you slaughter a cow, there's leather, but leather is not eatable. We wear it. It's an agricultural product. All right? And then we are country importing shoes. Sometimes they throw it in the agricultural import. So now, you will see that is a system of goods according to the level of manufacturing and processing. That's how they group it. So here, when we talk about it, we see meats and meat preparations are meat and meat preparation, like sausages, all these, you know. I don't know much about meat because I don't eat meat. So I'll switch on to cereals. So the different preparation and everything is there. Like, you know, wheat, maize, millet, all these things. In all forms. In all forms, all right, is there. Now you go down, you will see we from number 7, chapter 7, we jump off. Actually, there is a flip there. 7 should be the miscellaneous food. All right? So we jumped off a little. So these are the grouping that we used in the food import bills. And that should be the basis of us to use it. Because if you go, next slide when you see, so we use 11 excuse me, in this grouping, most of them. And this is the one that FAO will use when we talk of food imports. Food. Now, if I go to the WTO definition of agriculture, here, that's the things start getting a little confusing. Because WTO uses a different approach of defining. Though they're a member of the United Nations systems, though they have the countries' membership there, all the same, but their definition is different. Okay? For them, trade includes fish, aquatic product, and other non-food product. Okay? Notably, fibers. They have cotton, silk, which is an agricultural product, and forest product. All these things get involved into this. And non-eligible products of agricultural origin. So there, because the trading negotiations are done on those grouping of categories. And they are categorized in a lot of chapters. As everywhere, you will see that they were in divisions. Here we call it chapters. And each of these chapters are divided according to the digit level. All right. If we go, the chapter 01, this is aggregated, but in chapter 1, we don't use all of it. All right. There's certain animal product, animals, live animals. It's not considered in the food category because we can't import it and slow it and eat it. And then on the meat also, you will see the numbers stop certain. The chapter 4 numbers goes, I think it's 206. They will be there. So here with the next one, and they say because all of these are in the WTO agricultural agreements. Now, you will see on the bottom, out of the 5,000, if I take it right at the 4-digit level, it's about 5,200 lines of tariff lines of the product definitions. For agriculture, we have 276 lines that we use at HS4 level, because the further you break it down, the further detail you go. But that is enough, 4 level to get it. Then there is two group of product that we use, agricultural chemicals and chemical products, which are at 6-digit level to make the category of, which is on chapter 29 and 38. Here. Sometimes when we used to talk about this, we will say that in our discussion always that agriculture or AOA WTO negotiation agreement on agriculture, we used to take chapter 1 to 24. And Sufyan will always tell us, no, it's more than that. Because if you look there, there is number 33, essential oils, perfumery, cosmetics, and toiletry preparations. Here comes a good product from Ghana, the shea butter, which is our product, but we were not considering it. So in that category, that's what it comes down to. Like modified starch, all these things. Now, you will see, I just talk about hides, which is in chapter 41. In chapter 41. And all formal silk. In some part of India, in Cambodia, Vietnam, silk is a big component. Right? But yeah, we wear it, that's true, but we can't eat it. It doesn't fall in the category. So if we see the differences, it's big, huge. Now, if someone comes now tell me that, oh, our total import agri-food is this, I should not consider that as imports of food. So when computing this, we need to be sure that what we are talking, is it food or include all this? Now, when we go back now to what Africa Union says about it. According to the Africa Union Commodity Strategy, Africa Union agriculture definition go broader than that now. Okay? It is same thing, the first three, that crop, livestock, fisheries, forestry. Remember that in AOA, we did not have the forestry product. The timber was not there. Forest product was not there. Charcoal was not there. If my friend from Namibia will say, hey, are you crazy? Charcoal is a big sector for us. So Africa Union includes this. All right? So, and you will see that those are the product and commodity that they say for inclusive economic growth. Now, enterprise and food nutrition security, because somebody who is producing charcoal, that's going to help him earn income and get food and food security increases in the country. So here what it is. So we have 3 categories that we are working on. The SITC, which is the food, core food, then the WTO AOA agriculture definitions, and now we have the Africa Union. So while talking, we need to be cautious where we are and what we are talking. Now the databases. Sufyan already talked about FAO Stat, so I will not dwell there, not losing my time. And then there's a Comtrade database. The Comtrade database is a very comprehensive database that reports the data on trade. And you can say it's the Bible in a sense, because they are captured, treated, and still they have some mistakes. There is discrepancies because it's a big data platform and there's a lot of things to be done. Now, they report the data on various internationally recognized procedures and standards. If you will see, they report the volumes, the quantity, the tariffs, all these things are there. Now they have the SITC, the standard, the first original one. Then they have the HS code system now, harmonized system, that every country reports also. Then we have the broad economic categories, which I think I have through my career, I have used it only 3 or 4 times, not much. So that's what it is. Now the data are aggregated annually and monthly by product, trading partners, exporters, trade, all these. We have it. There's 200 countries and represent more than 99% of the world merchandise trade. Now, if I switch to the FAO one, this is also a public domain data, but if you are trying to download bulk data, you need to just send them a note and develop it. They will send you an API code so that it's fast to download it and process it on your way that you want. Or else you'll have to keep on clicking, doing this, that. They'll say, hey, you have reached your limit on the first attempt. So you will get frustrated. So you just send them an email. They're very good, mainly from developing countries. They respond quickly. They say, here's an API code. So use this, you can download and process your data. And we had worked with them a lot. Sufyan was also contributing. There was another colleague, I don't know where is he these days. We were contributing a lot to Comtrade. Then we have the FAO database. We have 25 countries. Yes, we have 25 countries. 25 countries. So the data is from 1961, the oldest data of our agriculture database. All right. We have this. Now, as I said, the data have a lot of problems, always. Those who work with data, first of all, we have outliers that need to be identified, all right, and addressed. There's missing data. Sometimes when you're downloading a data, you will see the imports, they will say 45, I'll just take a number, $45,000 amount. And then when you check the quantity, you see it's only 10 kilo. You say, oh, come on, how it's coming. So now the issue starts. So you have to manipulate it. You have to do imputations. You have to try to figure out where is the issues. Sometimes we just go back. Say, oh, where you imported it from? I imported it, many of the quantities is easy to get it. Oh, I imported it from South Africa. So let's go back to South Africa and see how much quantity they have recorded in theirs that they exported to country X. So we get it there. So all these things need to be looked upon before we start adding or computing and putting things together. So below you will see that there's a reference. I will not be able to click it because it's projected from there. We have developed a manual, all right, which is available. How you treat the data, because it's a quite technical things. So it would have taken me another 2 hours to, you will kick me out. What is done, how we do it, what is the processing is done, what is the probability sense we use to make sure that the missing data is treated and is justified, all right? Now, here are the formulas that you will see in the text there. The basically is the unit value, the food import bill in country I, period, time is period, and this. So if you're using the SIT data, we know that so many chapters are included, and how we calculate it and put it there. But there's something that you're not talking here. In the data, when you're calculating the data, working with the data, there's a lot of things that get re-exported. When I import it, I re-export it. All right? Like, I'll just take a good example here. Tea is a favorite commodity of mine. Many countries export tea. But when you look at the data, they're importing also. Basically, what it is tea, big tea states, like Lipton, Finlay, though they're in the country, They process the roti. The tea goes to UK. They blend it. They put it in small tea bags. And they ship back to you. The twin layer. And here I always have a big issue. When I'm attending the IGG Intergovernmental Body in tea, many colleagues on the other side of the part, when they see me, they say, oh, headache has come. So because that's a very tricky thing there. So, but I produce the tea, now you're exporting it back to me, and you write it, made in England, approved by the Queen of England. Oh, man. But the tea is where? From which origin? Kenya? Rwanda? It's not justified here. So just tell it, the tea of origin of this. Some of them I started writing this. So this is one of the issues I'm telling you. Also some meat come back and reprocessed in certain different form. So that's also another component that we need to look at when it's calculated and computed in these import bills. Because if you're trying to compute the Africa level imports bill, we need to know how much was intra-Africa traded. Or else we will inflate the numbers. So we need to get the bill, the intra-trade taken off. But at the global level, it doesn't matter when you calculate the import bill, because import and export, intra-trade, export, intra-trade, import zeroes out. But at Africa level, when you're talking, we need to realize that we don't want to do double counting. So now we will just give you a couple of things that we have examples. Here, this is the world number. This is a recent one, which is not still out. I think they're going to yeah, they're going to be putting out recent, I think this week or next week, FAO is putting it out. This is what it is going to be, changes from 2022 to this 21 to 22 and 23. That's what has been happening, all right, at the global level. Huh? Now, I will come back to the African continent more. I'm not going to talk about export revenue, because export revenue is pretty much the opposite of what we are importing. Okay. Now look at it. Export total. Here, when you take the export total, this is just to make you realize that the mistakes that we commit. The total export here includes re-exports and intra-regional exports. If you look at it, that's what we have. It's higher. But in reality, it should be the bottom one. Okay? Now, if you look at the blue, hard one, is the total one that these are taken out, we are taking it out. We are importing those from external, that means from outside the world, not intra. We have to be careful here, because if we add intra, then you will see the number goes up. So here we are trying to make it clear that what I'm trying to explain to you is this one. Now, what we import, as Ali has said, cereals. Our majority of import has been cereals. And funny part of that, we still import cocoa and coffee, spices from outside, where we produce and we ship out. But still we are importing some back. Yes. Yeah. No, there is one more. You gave them more time, why not me? So we don't fight here. Now, here's the import bills that we have, the major countries, major exporters and importers that we have. And now he's chasing me out, so I have to keep a little quiet too. You will be able to know which other major countries are importing and which other major countries are exporting, and mainly external we are talking. What are our export destinations? We are still depending on European Union for our imports and for our exports. So, we need to diversify a little, because we saw it from COVID, that if we have put all our eggs in one basket, the risk is high. So diversification is there. But Russia is still there. We always blame China, but China, our trade and export and import destination, is not much. That's a big market. India is a big market. All right? You will see Malaysia is mostly oil and oil seeds, and processed food, like biscuits and others that come out of Malaysia, surprisingly. So, what is my final remark? We need to be aware of what we are doing, what we are calculating, and what are our assumptions, so that when we throw numbers there, it's just not a number. We have to make sure, because in the academic world, I've been there, we go to the database, or click, 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 click down, put in the graph, and throw it out. But that's not right. Yes. So that's what I have. And to tell you the truth, we are still working because, as you have noticed, when Ali presented, he said sub-Saharan African countries, because we are using still the UN groupings. Now, with AFCTA coming on the table, we are trying to disaggregate it to make it at Africa level. So it's a little work more to be done, which is going to be happening. And then before Thomas coming to me, he has written a piece recently about talking about the myth and the misconception of food import bills. So I would like him, if he jump in, let's put it. Thanks.
Thank you, Kuli.
Thank you, sir.
You know, when he said to tell you the truth, I thought all along he's been lying. Okay, no, thanks. I'm going to call upon Salomo to come and respond to that. But before he does that, let me clarify one thing. The first two presenters and the discussant were within the time allocated to them. The time that we added to was for question and answers, which means it's your time that we gave a lot than the presenter. So please, presenters, stick to your time so that I can have enough time for question and answers. Okay, so after Salom has given his response, we are going to have Q&A, and they have discussed with the professor of ceremonies, and she has allowed us to go for tea break. So after we finish the Q&A, we'll go for a 10 minutes tea break, and then we come and finish the session for today. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Director of Ceremonies and Ravin, for setting the scene. What I will talk about in terms of food import bills, I'll try and engage from the lower end of the value chain, as a farmer, and also the associated, challenges that we deal with as farmers. We talked about a couple of issues around policies, and my big concern is, and I stand to be corrected, we need to move to the next level. I think all of us, as we are here, we've attended so many conferences where we discuss issues about actions and so on. But the output is actually very, very minimal. And as a farmer, I'm a little bit concerned. What is it that we are not doing to reduce the cost of importation of food? I think that's just a little bit of politics from that end. If you look at some countries and how they deal with their economies, it's a bit interesting. You know, in Africa, we have the mining sector in most of the countries that dominates, you know, the contribution to the GDP, right? How best can we, you know, utilize the resources from the mining sector to fund the issues that we talked about, you know, from, you know, food production, to reduce the cost of producing food, cost of transportation, you know, creating a favorable environment for farmers as a whole. The next one is when we deal with these policies, you know, in the context of food import bills, let me not veer off from the topic. The responsibility is not on anybody else rather than ourselves to create these favorable policies, to also ensure that we put, you know, relevant and, you know, current regulations. And most importantly, I think from a policy perspective, we do have a couple of good policies, right, that talk about food production. But the issue is about, you know, allocation of resources. How do we allow, you know, resources to be allocated? How do we ensure that, you know, we implement these policies, you know, as planned? Now, when it comes to food and food production, food trade, and so on, there are two issues, you know, that we need to, you know, deal with. The one is food security. The other one is food sovereignty, right? At the moment, from the graph that Ravin actually presented there, I think we are still at a level where, you know, we are still trying to be food secure, right? We are not yet at the level whereby we are, you know, able to export to a greater extent. But most importantly is, I was a little bit concerned when I look at our dependence on the EU. Just briefly, if you look at what is contained in the EU Green Deal, I even get more worried. It's more like Chapoto's graph that he showed yesterday. Because if you look at the specifics within the EU Green Deal, there's an expectation that, you know, there should be, you know, whatever we produce must be close to, you know, zero toxins within it. There's a lot of impetus that is put on preservation of the ecosystem as well as biodiversity. And all in all, you know, whatever we produce, you know, we need to be, you know, environmentally friendly. Are we, you know, as Africa, able to comply with these, you know, requirements? As policymakers, what is it that we can do to ensure that we are aligned, you know, to the biggest trading partner from a food perspective? Director of Ceremony, how many more seconds do I have? Yes. So, all in all, what is important for us is let's action what we're talking about. Let's oil, you know, these policies. Let's be accountable. Let's see what is happening. I think next year, when we meet, wherever we're going to meet, right, I want us to be able to come up with, you know, issues and activities that we've implemented. I think I will leave you with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think let's go straight into questions. We are going to use only 10 minutes for the questions and answers. So any clarifications that you may want? Okay, so 1, 2. Okay, because I'm going to close. If I close the questions, I close. So I only have 2, going 1, going 2.
Got one here.
Okay, going 3. Okay, so how many do we have? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So please be specific. Don't add too much introduction. And colleagues who are following us online, please put your questions in the Q&A. If we don't answer them during this session, we'll at least address them after tea break. Okay.
Thank you. Let me be number 1. Prof, with all this that you have told us, how do you look at now the historical data? Do we now see as if the current data is bad? What about now the past data? Is it worse or something? And that also points to the source of data, which you have not actually talked about, which affects FAO stat. FAO stat, there is a problem with source of data. While there are formulas to calculate data, there is one particular one which is now called extrapolation. Data is collected once, then for the next 10 years, it is just extrapolated until another census is done.
Okay.
So, what is the quality in our data?
Thank you.
General.
Second question.
Thank you. You highlighted a point on data cleaning. So you indicated that when you have outliers, for example, on the export data for Malawi, when the figure is an outlier, you check with the importing country and you clarify with them. But my question now is, when you clarify with the importing country in that case, and you have a correct figure, do you feed it back to the exporting country? I'm asking this because sometimes the data we find in international databases differs with the national databases. And I think this is a big issue to a researcher. You don't know what to trust. Thank you.
Thank you. The last question. Okay, nice. Is there? Okay. Go ahead. And can you that's the last person?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Prof, for the presentation. And on the issue of data quality, of course, that is an important element. I'm just curious whether you're looking forward to finding ways of accounting for cross-border data, because, I mean, like, from the presentations that we've seen yesterday, Prof. Chiwala just set down the products and commodities that go through cross borders unaccounted. Those, they are part of trade and they really have value and they change lives. But in this test, I'll just be interested in seeing whether that is being considered for that quality of data that you're looking into. Thank you.
A cross-border, do you mean smuggling?
Let's say informal.
I think, Ambassador, I'll give
sorry,
you.
You also have one more online. Yes.
Can you read it for me, please?
Okay, I'll give Chris.
Sure. Okay, just a minute.
Okay.
Ambassador, if you can take your seat.
This is from Maria. It says, how will this import-export equilibrium be impacted by the upcoming European Union laws on compliance with sustainability?
Okay, you got the question? Sophia and the colleagues. Okay. Let's have Ambassador, you are the last one.
Thank
and I'll close my eyes so I won't be able to see any one of you who will put up your hands.
Thank you very much. What I know is that African exports was reduced by India, Vietnam, and China exporting to the world. I think that is my answer to this. So the issue of China, India, Vietnam, Thailand becoming more efficient in agriculture is what kicked us out of the world market. So all this data goes back to that reason. That's number one. Number two, I also know, and I hope my data is correct this time, because the other one I know, I have evidence. The other one is that America and Europe are producing 60% more food today on just 13% more land in 1960. So, Those two things tell us that we have to style up in the same market with both the European methodology and then Asian methodology. Because if we don't, kalas or kaput.
Thank you, Ambassador. Yeah, I think Ambassador was contributing to the discussions. Now we've got basically data issues, data quality, past data, and everything, and then the question that came online. So I think I'll start with Sophia, and if you can address the question that came online, and then Ponis, you can address the data issues.
Yes, I think the question was asking how is the data quality going to be affected by the EU laws? Is that okay? And I don't see, I mean, the level of quality of data collection in the continent is not good. At the national level, it is bad. We use data as well from the national level. And one preaching from FAO is if you have national level data, use it. Because at least you can validate it, you can verify that it comes from the country itself. And all the data we use actually comes from the country, from Comtrade, from other databases. And then every 3-4 years we go back 15 years to validate that data so that at least by that time new data would have come up. We know in the case of FAO stat, which somebody mentioned, the data is only valid, I mean, you have a 3-year gap, and that is how long it takes for countries to report data. So a lot of the time there are projections. Then another point I want to make before I try to see if I can talk about the EU policy is the fact that a lot of the data we used are commercial imports, not commercial plus food aid. So that needs to be qualified also in the analysis that we do. FAO Stat has only commercial import data. We do have another database that has food aid import data. So those distinctions need to be made because in some countries food aid is higher than commercial imports. Then somebody made a point about cross-border data. We are trying to see how we could collect that. It is very costly to collect. There are small volumes taking place, but there are some countries, especially in this region, that are trying to be able to collect that data. But by the time you collect that data and process it, it comes to the National Statistical Office. I mean, it takes considerable amount of time and resources. So yes, we are not certain of that data. The other data we are trying to look at besides food is services, agricultural services. We have no information on that in the continent. Another important source of data, especially for landlocked countries, are the inland maritime, the inland trade that take place along the rivers. Nobody has data on that. You see, so we are losing all of that when it comes to concrete policy analysis. Now, of course, I mean, the EU, I think the onus is on the exporter to verify that these things meet the standards that they have set under their agreement, and they will do it by themselves. But you have to, there's going to be tons of forms to fill, you know, because we have no competent authority to be able to test all of this regulation. So definitely it is going to affect our data, because when you export to the EU and they reject it, it takes time for you to how do you classify that data, you know? So we are finding that about 30% of the food is rejected because of one or two shortages in standard requirements. You see, how does that data fit in again into your database? It is a problematic thing, except you do a focus study to say, okay, the EU rejected $30 million of tomatoes from Ghana, you know, because they found one or two fruit flies in it. And now it is going to be much more stringent. So that is definitely going to affect what we are doing. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so if any one of you has a comment, please.
Yeah, what I will just briefly talk about is, you know, from a data perspective, I'm one of those people that strongly advocate for formalization of the informal sector, right? Because we don't really, you know what exactly is happening. And it's quite critical, for, African governments to try and, create a formal, so that we are a formal way of trading within those informal sectors. I think I will just leave it there.
Laponis?
Yeah, I will take a couple of more, longer a little. First of all, cleaning the data. One thing, let's put it this way. Data never lies. It's there. But what you put there, it's where you're lying. We need to realize it. All right? Coming down. Data that is provided to FAO database. I'm not going to go to Comtrade yet, but data. Every year, FAO sends to the countries. Now it's online, they get it, that they need to fill it up and send it to us. That data goes through a process of verifying and checking it out. We have a lot of system to cross-check. And when we find discrepancy, systematically it's rejected. Now, as a statistical officer who I'm sitting there and compiling it, I say, I don't care whether this guy sent me wrong data or not. So when they come back to you after 6-7 months, the data is not there. So they leave it blank. But realizing that we have signed the agreement by the Constitution, when you adhere to the members as a member state of FAO, that you're going to provide the data. So here I'm not defending FAO also. It's a joint partnership that we need to make proof that the data, what you are getting from the country, and that there is justifiable. I always say, if you see a data on the database of FAO, if it's wrong, please flag it out. All right. Myself, once I was looking at the data for Fiji on sugar. When I look at this data on sugar, I say, but this country is producing amazing number of tons of sugar. But what was there, it was sugar cane was reported. So I called the colleague downstairs, I say, hey, I think something has got wrong there. He said, no, that's what the country has reported. I said, what? He said, that the country have reported. I said, man, you need to reduce by at least, multiply it by 0.8%, 0.8 to get that volume of sugar, because the extraction rate is 0.8. He said, well, let's write them back. I said, no, I can't write them because I'm not in your division. So we wrote them. They came back, they say, yeah, you're right, it was a mistake. And the mistake was repeated. So working on 245 countries, it's not going to be easy. So if we want to get quality, and the question now depends, what is a quality data? Okay, as I said to you when you started reading, I came from the world of statistics and maths, right? At the Indian Statistical Institute, we were always questioning these things, the data. So some of the professors, they left for the US, they used to say, that's how third world countries will get beaten. I say, why? Because we don't give proper data. Our numbers are not right. When we go to the developed world, the numbers are right. Okay? Now, the question of informal trade and this, it's always an issue. We don't know how to solve it. Now, quickly I'm jump back to the Comtrade data. Comtrade work with the World Customs Union. And they have a software called the ASCUDA system. All custom in the countries are locked into it. Now, when you do a shipper is shipping a good, it has a form. They put the code on it that this HS code is being shipped out. When that receives the other end of the country there on the other side when you arrive, your document is already gone. Your product is coming, the other party is looking at it. When they cross-check that, the HS code that you put here is not the same HS code that is supposed to be there. Here the discrepancy comes in. They will reject it. They will tell you, go back and do a pro forma again to revise that. So these are the mistakes that do happen. But with the ASCUDA system, to tell you the truth, about 92 to 95%, we are correct now. With time, they learned it. Okay? And we also, I think, in the Pacific Island, now they're calling it the crab process. Because they cross-check with other country at the same time, and they cross-check with themselves. So it's, with the science world, with the technology, I think, we are on the track to get the data correct now. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, let's give a hand to our panel speakers. 10 minutes tea break, coffee break, refreshments. So we should be back at 11:25, back in the room.
Please note that it is exactly 10 minutes,
Sure.
and then we will continue with the rest of the session.
Exactly.
We will start
Sounds
with
allowed.
those who are there.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, just a quick reminder, if you haven't signed up for the Sunset Cruise and you want to sign up for it, please see Maria or Eva as soon as possible. We're finalizing our numbers for this evening. Those who want other activities can just find out from the hotel what else they can do around the area. I was told to give you another announcement. Now I need to find it. I think for now, let's work with that. Yes, let's work with those two announcements for now. Exactly 25 past. We will start with those who are here. Thank you.